We continue now at the top of Daf Chaf Dalet Amud Beis in Meseches Rosh Hashana. This is Rosh Hashana Daf 24b. The Bryce here continues Shel Chamisha v'Shel Shisha v'Shel Shmona. Let's say you make a menorah that has 5 or 6 or 8 branches. That's actually okay. V'Shel Shiva lo Yasa, but you can't make a menorah that has 7 branches because that's the same as was in the Beis Hamikdash. Afilo Shel Shar Minim Matochas, and even if it's made of other kinds of metal, even if it's not made out of gold, that's still a problem. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, Af Shalates, even if you make it out of wood, it's a problem. Lo Yasa, you shouldn't make it that way. Kederach Shasu Malchei Beis Chashmonai, because that's the way they made it. The kings of the Chashmonaim, they made it out of wood. Because Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda holds if you make the menorah out of wood, even that is considered kosher. So that would be usher again to make it similar to the way it could be made in the Beis Hamikdash. And so the Brisa continues. Amru lo, they said to him, they responded to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, Misham Raya. From there, you bring a Raya from the Chashmonaim. Shefud and Shal Barzel, those were actually iron rods. Hayu, that's what they used when they were making the menorah in the times of the Chashmonaim. V'chipam v'batz, and they coated it with tin. Hashiru, and then they became wealthier. Asam shel kesef, they made it out of silver. Chazru hashiru, they became even wealthier. Asam shel zav, then they made them out of gold. But the Gemara continues, V'shamoshin she'yefsher lasos kamosan mishari, but still, is it really permitted to make those things that serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu that cannot be replicated? Is it really permitted to make diagrams to make those images? V'atanya, but we learned in a brayso, lo sasun iti, lo sasun kidmus shamoshai, hameshamshin lefanai bamorum. This brayso says, what does it mean, lo sasun iti? It means you can't make those that serve me in the heavens, apparently referring to the sun and the moon. And again, it's a question on Rabbi Gamliel, who had these diagrams of the moon that he used to ask the Edom questions. So Amar Abaya, so Abaya says, lo asra Torah, ela demus arbo ponim bahadi hadadi. When the Torah says you can't make the things that serve in the marum, in the heavens, it's referring to the Maisa Merkava. The Maisa Merkava was a creature with 4 faces. You're not allowed to make these kind of 4 faces, those images. But the Gemara says, Ela me'ata, but according to that, parts of Adam l'chudei tishtari. It's only a problem if you make all 4 faces together, but just the face of a human should be okay. Alama Tanya, why is it that we learned in a brisa? Kol ha-partzufus mutar, and all the faces are mutar, chutz mi parts of Adam, except you're not allowed to make the face of a man. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna Breder Avidi, mi pirkei da Abaya shmieli. Rav Huna Breder Avidi said that I heard from the shiurim of Abaya, lo sasun iti, lo sasun osi. We understand the pasuk of lo sasun iti as lo sasun osi, don't make me, and meaning people are made in the image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore you're not allowed to make the face of a human. Ushar shamoshin mishari, but the Gemara still asks, is it really permitted to make these other shamoshin, meaning again like the sun and the moon? V'atanya, but we learned in a brisa, lo sasun iti, lo sasun kidmus shamoshai, hameshamshin lefanai b'maram. Again, don't make those images of those that serve me in the heavens. Kagon ofanim, usrafim, v'chayos hakodesh, u'malachei asharis. These are all different kinds of malachim that serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Shamayim. You can't make any of those images, and apparently that includes the sun and the moon as well. And the Gemara says, no, Amar Abaya says, Lo asra Torah l'shamoshin shebemadar ha'elyon. The Torah only prohibits those that serve in the upper heavens. But those that are like the sun and the moon in the lower heavens, so to speak, that would still be permitted. But the Gemara says, V'shebemadar hatachton mishari, is that really true? Is it really permitted to make those that are in the madar hatachton? V'atanya, but we learned in a brisa, Asher b'shamayim l'rabos chamo u'levana kochavim u'mazolos. That's exactly what Asher b'shamayim means, to include the sun and the moon and the stars. And mimal l'rabos malachi asharis, and the word mimal means to include the malachim. And so the Gemara answers, no, Kitanya, that price is referring la'avdam. You're not allowed to serve the sun and the moon and the stars, but you are allowed to make those images. But the Gemara says, but if we're talking about to serve them, afilu shil shel katanam, even a small worm, you're not allowed to serve. Why would the pasuk have to identify the sun and the moon? Anything you're not allowed to serve. So the Gemara says, Enochinami, no, you're right. The Tanya, we learned in a brayso, asher ba'aretz, the pasuk also says that which is in the land. Larabos, harim, ugavos, yamim, unharos, afikim, v'gayayos, that includes the mountains and the valleys and the seas and the rivers and the streams. All of those things are included. And mitachas larabos shil shel katan, and the word mitachas includes even the small worm, and really the psukim are talking about serving. That's exactly what the psukim mean, but you are allowed to make the images. But the Gemara still asks, Vasiya Gereda Tam Yishari, is it really permitted to make these images of the sun and the moon? V'atanya, but we learned in a brayso, Lo Sasun Iti, you can't make, Lo Sasun Kidmus Shamoshai Meshamshin Lefana, you can't make like those things that serve me in the heavens, Kegon Chamo Levana Kochavim Mazolos, like the sun and the moon and the stars and the Mazolos. So you see clearly you're not allowed to make an image of the moon. So the question remains on Rabbi Gamliel, how did he have diagrams of the moon? And so the Gemara answers, Shani Rabbi Gamliel Gamliel is different, because others made those images for him. In other words, he didn't make the images of the moon. Somebody else made it, the non-Jews made it, and he just had it in his possession. But the Gemara says, but what about Rav Yehuda? The was the same thing. Other people made these images for him. In that case, it was images of a face. V'yomer le Shmuel Rav Yehuda, and Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, Shinan, a sharp one, Sami eine dedain. You should destroy the eyes of this face over here. In other words, if you disfigure the image, then it will be okay. So you see, again, in this case, he didn't make it, but apparently it was a problem to have it in his possession. And so the Gemara says there's a little different. Hasam over there, Chosamo Bolet have it. The case over there was it was a protruding seal, Umisham Chashadim. The concern over there was that people would suspect that he had Avodah Zarah in his possession. Where there's a real suspicion of Avodah Zarah, that would be a problem. Kedatani, as we learned in a Brisa, Tabas, let's say a person has a ring. So Chosamo Bolet, if the seal is protruding on the ring, so Asr Lanicha, he can't wear it, because when it's protruding, again, it looks like Avodah Zarah. Umutter Lachsam, but it is mutter to use it to create a seal, because when you use a ring, a signet ring where it's protruding, so it creates the seal is now not protruding, it's actually indented, and that's fine. Chosamo Shokea, but the other way around, let's say you have a ring where the signet is actually sunken into the ring, it's not protruding, so then mutter lahanicha, then it's mutter to wear the ring because it doesn't look like Avodah Zarah. However, va'asr lachtom, but it's asr to actually use it to create a seal, because again, the seal that you're going to create is now going to protrude, which would be a problem. But the Gemara continues, but are we really concerned that people will suspect that the person is serving Avodah Zarah? But there was a Beis HaKnesses, there was a shul in Eretz Yisrael that was destroyed, and they relocated it to Nardoi, to have a Be'andarta, and there was actually a statue in that shul, and that was relocated as well. And yet Rav and Shmuel and the father of Shmuel and Levi would go and daven there, and there was no concern that people would suspect that they were serving Avodah Zarah. And the Gemara answers, Rabim Shani, when you have a public, something that's used by the public, it's different. There's no suspicion in that case. But the Gemara says, so still we have a problem. But Rabbi Gamliel was an individual, he wasn't a public, and so it should be the exact same problem. There should be a concern that people should be afraid or should suspect that maybe people will suspect he's serving Avodah Zarah. So the Gemara says, no, Kevin, the Nasi who Shchichi Rabim Gabe. Since Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi, so there was a lot of people there, it was a public place, and again, in a situation of the public, there's no concern that people will suspect Avodah Zarah. If you want, I could say another answer, the Prakim have it. The images that Rabbi Gamliel had of the moon, they weren't whole images, they were assembled by pieces that were put together, and that's not a problem. And if you want, I could say another answer, he made these images for the purpose of Torah learning. And the pasuk says, Lo silmad lasos. You can't make avalat halamid lahavin lahoros. In other words, you can't make it, you can't learn it in order to serve the Avodah Zarah. But if you're doing it in order to serve the purpose of learning Torah, so then it is permitted. The Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Ma'isa shabo shnayim v'yamru. There was a story where two witnesses came and they said, Re'inu shacharis b'mizrach. We saw it in the morning in the east. Rashi says, Re'inu shacharis b'mizrach es hayishana. In other words, we saw the old moon, the moon from the last month. We saw it in the morning in the east. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chafhei Amud Aleph.